Okay, we're going to cut to the chase and just start putting this thing together. One thing I failed to mention in the other video, this has a flat side and a chamfered side. The flat side goes up. This Torrington bearing goes on top of it. It actually helps get the center support. But it gets in the way later. There's a special tool to put this in, but these work just fine. This goes in the bottom of the case. These are selective, so you can set your end play on the rear half of your gear train. Well, your gear train, but on the rear half of the transmission. There's two different end plays on this transmission, the rear and the front. Not sure how this is going to work, but can't be too terrible. So that selective goes down there. The band goes in. You gotta watch on these band pins on the case. If you can see them in there or not. These things like to pop out a little bit. I've actually had them pop out completely to the point where the transmission has no reverse. Gotta watch that. Pay close attention. Once I got the band in, I like making sure it's seated. Just stick something up through the servo hole and just make sure it's there. And this goes down in the case next. Goes all the way on the bottom of these lugs. All the way to the bottom. The center support just basically sits on this, so it's not sitting on the aluminum. You always want your snap ring ends to line up over here in midair. The center section of these cases is actually a weak spot. This can sometimes be a bugger to put in. You want to line it up properly. This goes on the edge of the lugs. This obviously goes straight down. Find the hole in my bucket here. Oh, that didn't work. You gotta make sure the whole thing drops in all at once. You can drop the rest of it down and the center support will pop out of the low roller clutch. And then things don't work so good. You gotta take it back out like I did, put it back together. Then you put that in. Then there's this guy. You put this in. Your snap ring groove's over there. What I'm going to do before I do this though, or the center support bolt goes in down here. You're going to torque it. While holding the center support counterclockwise. So I'm inside with the screwdriver holding the center support counterclockwise, torquing the bolt. Now I'll put the snap ring on. Only reason I didn't put the snap ring on before is because it would have been in my way. Once again, snap ring end gap over here. Then we'll put in the wave plate, which I didn't mention in the other video. This is actually, all three of these intermediate steels I reused. It's kind of a pain in the butt to try to find the right one sometimes, so it's just easier sometimes to scuff them up a little bit and reuse them. All these clutches have been soaked for, well, if I'm being honest, a couple weeks. Actually, a couple months. Didn't exactly get back to this as quick as I would like to have. Okay, then these can be kind of a pain. We'll line up the ends. Try to center it up as best you can. Because now we got to drop that direct clutch in and it can really be a bugger. The way I do it, I hook my pinky fingers under the retainer for the springs. And bam, put it in. Another thing I didn't mention in the other video where I kind of explained everything is this valve body comes with higher pressure direct clutch springs that go under this retainer. If you don't do that, you end up with centrifugally apply for the direct clutch. So you'll take off in first gear and your direct clutch will centrifugally apply from the fluid behind the piston going out and expanding, and it'll actually push the piston applied and you'll burn up your direct clutch. Another thing I didn't mention was clutch pack clearance. There's 6 discs in each one of these clutches, forward and direct. I want to say the forward came out at 78 thousandths and the direct came out at just shy of 90. I did cut the pistons in the lathe to get that. You're better off to err on the side of more clearance than less. You will get drag if it's too little, and you will get clutches starting to burn up, not even applied, if it's not enough clearance. So you want to be careful with that. More is better than not enough. Another thrust washer here. There's another bronze one on the other side of this. I didn't mention that. I forgot to mention that in the other video. The Transbrake does omit the intermediate band. That's just an engine brake band anyway. There it is. So when it's in, you can take the input shaft kind of with a little pressure with your thumb and rock it all the way around. I did that a couple times on the way in because I thought it was in, but it didn't. Now I can tell it's in for sure. If it doesn't rock like this or it kind of goes like this, it's stuck. You've got a clutch that's not engaged all the way. So keep wiggling it. Gotta get violent with it sometimes, not a big deal. Now we'll put the pump together. Well, as you can see, this is in good shape. When they're not, I can press these stator supports out, resurface them on the flywheel machine over there. There's really no need to. This is in real nice shape. Being that there's a turbo, this is a turbo 400, there's really no reason to modify much on the pump. It was a Power Glider Turbo 350. They don't have an open bottom over here, but there's a channel where the pressure side of the pump is. I'll drill a hole, a 1/16 inch hole, depending on the tranny. I think Power Glides, they drill one. Turbo 350s, I'll drill two. It just kind of gives it pressure feed to the back side of this outer pump gear, and it makes them, it seems to make them last a bit longer. I've had good luck doing it. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe it doesn't help at all, I don't know. Seems to work really well for me. Anything I can do to make these things last a little longer is definitely helpful. They sure don't seem to last very long. The bolt length on this long one is really similar to the valve body bolts. It's only about an 1/8 inch shorter. You gotta pay attention to what you're doing and you screw it up in a hurry. So I use this gigantic hose clamp as a pump alignment ring. It works really well. I actually have a store-bought pump alignment ring. I like this one a little better. Store-bought one's kind of a pain in the butt to use. So what I do is I kind of just give it a little snugging, and I'll look through the bolt holes. make sure they're fairly happy. Then I'll crank it down, because you can get the bolt holes kind of off a quarter hole, and then once you get the pump tight, you can't get it to go in the transmission too. It's good times. I do this by feel. I'm sure there's a torque spec, probably right around 25 foot-pounds. A grade 5/16 bolt. Probably closer to 20. I think a grade 8. I think a grade 8 5/16 bolt is 25. Pop out the boost valve. Whee! Turbo 400s will most of the time have this little shim in there. It's a way to kind of pour them in, soup them up. Make sure it moves freely. Grab the new spring, prepare the new spring. This is actually an aftermarket spring. It had a shift kit in it already. Pretty hard to tell the difference, really. Take and put some goo on the end of the boost valve so it doesn't fall apart 9 times on the way back in. Even though it probably still will. These can be particularly tricky. Yeah, see, it fell apart anyway. Okay, tossed it in the vise, popped right in, no big deal. The camera always makes things more fun. No sarcasm there involved. So we'll lube that up good. Not quite that good. Lube this up good. This is actually more important than lubing the square cut. Sometimes you don't get it perfect. Got to tap sideways on some of the bolts. Try not to ever run them in by use of force if I don't have to. Just doesn't ever work. See how I'm putting them all in just one finger. If they're any harder than that, it's time to reevaluate. Doesn't take much to screw up one of these cases. Last one I just did, I had to stud a bunch of these holes because they were all messed up. Made some special studs and ran them in. Then you're not working on the case threads to draw them tight, you're working on the stud thread. A lot better for everything. Studs are a pain in the butt though. I steer clear of them whenever I can. I'm gonna blast the check ball into this hole. I really don't like doing this, but that's what they want, and I don't see any way around it on this particular application. I really don't like doing it that way, but what do you do? Then we can put our servo in. Lube the bore where the O-ring goes. Lube the O-ring. Now with the Transbrake and that plugged in check ball, you want to pull the seal rings off the accumulator. Kind of work your way around this because you are pushing that piston down while you snug this. You don't want to cock everything all kittywampus. For the valve body, some glue down. Line it up with the holes, all that happy jazz. Put some more glue down, not a ton. I want the gasket to stick before this sticks to the gasket. And I've had this issue with these before. The plate actually needs to be trimmed because it doesn't fit. So right here in this little corner, it hits the servo. It needs to be trimmed. Not a big deal. Aftermarket parts, kind of a common issue. So I'll give the plate a little haircut and I'll be right back. I gave it a little trim on the bench grinder. Cleaned it up with a file so it didn't look like an angry cat chewed it off, or a beaver. Not that anybody's ever going to see it, but somebody takes it apart, I don't want somebody to look at it and go, who's the jackass that built this thing? You know, it's the whole pride in your work thing. Did it again. One thing I've always been really good at on Th400, I made this little tool. So one tool kind of does the shifter shaft seal thing. That little lip in there. Pops the seal out. Put it on there. New one's installed. Okay, so like I was saying, the one thing I always forget about on these Th400s is before you put the pump in, you gotta have your shifter goodies in there. Because there's a pin that goes through that holds this thing in. And I'm using the word pin loosely because it's a friggin' finishing nail. That's all it is. It's all it's ever been. But I will tell you, not the end of the world. It's kind of my trademark because I always forget to do this. All you really got to do is cut the thing off. Cut it off. So it fits in there with the pump in there. Right through. Give it a little tweak on the end so it can't fall out. Not ideal. Very functional. It's not going anywhere. Oops. It's not going anywhere. Valve body comes with a new manual valve. Set that sucker on there. Ooh, there it is. I like to lube all these bolts with transmission fluid. A little easier on the case going in, not going in dry that way. set that right there for now. Add a little lube on the brake valve. Put that in. Put a lube on the O-ring. Put the solenoid on. You just want to check your travel. That should work. So we deleted the governor on this thing, so I'm going to put the governor cover on. There's no governor in there. I like to put them on backwards just because it's a little more extra clearance. I mean a little. A little's appreciated sometimes. A lot of times these bolt holes are bent down, so you don't even have to flatten out the bolt holes if you flip it over. We'll go ahead and put a new O-ring on there. I have no idea if this guy's even going to use a speedo, but either way, might as well make it so it'll work for him. In factory, these things only have one of these little seals in it. It's usually worn into the shaft pretty good. This one actually looks pretty good. But what I'm going to do is I'll put 2 of these little lip seals in it, because there's plenty of real estate for it, and one always leaks. So here I got my 2 seals. Obviously you want the lip in. You can do the same thing on a Turbo 350 too. But a lot of times there's not enough real estate to do it, so you gotta kind of trim on the seals a little bit to make them fit. Which isn't the end of the world, it's just kind of a pain in the butt. Usually do it with a little pair of scissors. Put it back together. Put a little lube around that sucker. Pop that guy in. Another trick for the filter, I leave the old O-ring on and put a new one on top of it. Double up the O-rings. Works good. Lube required. All that's left is to put the pan on and put the tail shaft housing on. Not much to that, so I'm not going to waste your time with that. So that should just about sum it up. If you got any questions, put them in the comments. That's all for now.